In this video, I want to talk about one of my favorite pieces of plastic, which may be a little bit more of a forgotten one, which is the tube. We recently watched Hunter Shyrock, I think, get 4th place in the Bassmaster Classic, and he was fishing nothing but a standard tube. Now, I relate a lot to that because, you know, Hunter's from Ohio, I'm obviously from Ohio, and I feel like when I grew up, all I did was fish a lot of tubes, and I caught fish everywhere on this bait. But this bait's been a little bit forgotten. So in this video, we're going to talk about a few situations where I really like to fish the tube. Now, before we get into it, this video is brought to you by my apparel company, Finn Fishing. And right now for the month of March, so just another day or so, if you buy a USA made sun shirt, which is one of the only ones made in the US, or a pair of the duck shorts, which are water resistant and highly durable and lightweight, you will get a free Buzzer Rocks Blood Stop formula. So this is a really cool product all by itself. If you've ever hooked a fish really deep, you take this thing out, you spray it on them, it's going to help clot the blood, and it gives a bass an 85% better chance of survival. So really cool product. You can also just purchase this off of Finn Fishing. But anyways, I'm gonna leave some links down below. Shopping at Finn Fishing is the best way to help support this channel, and I greatly appreciate all of you who have done so. All right, let's talk about the tube. The tube is one of those baits, like I said, it was my first true love. The exact tube that I used to fish back in the day, I think that they still make these. I'm actually really not sure, but it was the Yum Vibra King tube. And the reason that I even started fishing that was because in 2001, the Bassmaster Classic was on the Louisiana Delta, and Tim Horton was flipping and pitching a Yum Vibra King tube. And I thought that that was the coolest crap I had ever seen in my life. So that was back when I was like 10 or 11 years old. I picked up a Yum Vibra King tube, and I'm telling you what, for probably the next 7 years of my life, if I could not catch a bass, I would put a 1/4 ounce weight with a Yum Vibra King tube in green pumpkin, and I would just start going down the bank and just start flipping and pitching it. Which actually brings me to my first place that I really like to fish this bait is when a lot of other guys are flipping and pitching. When you get to these lakes where, you know, like flipping and pitching is the absolute deal, like maybe it's a certain time of the year where everyone's flipping and pitching, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that the tube bait is one of those ones that these guys will pick up last, because there are so many good flipping and pitching baits these days. I mean, not only baits like jigs, but baits like your beaver. Beaver is probably the biggest, the one that's fished the most. Baits like a crawl, a standard crawl. You know, all your like different crawl and hog style baits. Like there's so many different baits, and I'm telling you what, the tube is probably the one that is fished the least out of all of them. So when I go to these lakes that are highly pressured when it comes to flipping and pitching, a tube is just one of those baits that you have to pick up because it's simply something different. I remember fishing down in Florida with my uncle a number of years ago. And this is when I kind of had my love resurge again for the tube, because I went down to Florida, and when you go to Florida, you're flipping and pitching all the time in grass, and what you primarily do is flip like Cincos, you know, 5-inch Cinco, 6-inch Cinco, straight-tailed worms. That is what you do in Florida. And I remember getting whooped up by my uncle, and guess what he was fishing? The tube. And again, it just reminded me, man, the tube is such a really good bait. I need to fish it. Now, the other thing that I like about a tube, which is a little bit different, is it's a very slender bait. So sometimes when I am fishing in cover, like heavier cover, you can get away with fishing a little bit lighter weight on a tube because it just slips through the cover so nicely. So sometimes when you have to fish, you know, a 1/2 ounce, 5/8, a 3/4 ounce weight on like a hog style bait, you can actually get away with like a 3/8 ounce on a tube. And I have always thought that the lighter the weight that you can get away with, typically the more bites that you're going to get. So when I come into those situations where I want a little bit lighter presentation to help me get a few more bites, a tube is a really, really good bait. Also, A tube for me is one of my #1 baits when it is really cold. And I'm not always flipping and pitching it. I will flip and pitch it when it's cold. But what I like to do a lot of times is fish like channel swing banks. You know, this happens a lot in the late fall and in kind of the early spring, where fish are starting to make their ways into the backs of pockets and creeks. And some of these last channel swing banks, what I like to do with the tube is I'm gonna cast that bait. You know, I'm gonna stay a little bit further away. Typically I'm at about a 45-degree angle. I'm gonna cast the bait up there to the bank, and I'm gonna work it all the way back down to me. And when I'm fishing in really cold water, like a lot of times this happens in like 45, 46, 47-degree water, low 50-degree water, a tube is probably your best bait to get a number of bites. Now I will fish this exact same pattern with a number of different baits, like I've done it with big spinner baits and jigs and crankbaits, but to me a tube gets you the most bites out of all of those. So when I'm fishing in cold water, there's something about a tube that just gets me a lot of bites. I actually remember another Bassmaster Classic, the one when Bill Lowen, I think he was leading or in second place after the first day on Grand Lake, and he was doing almost this exact same thing that I'm talking about. He was fishing creek channel swing banks with a tube. The water was really cold. He was getting a lot of bites with the bait. Now, the last time that I really like to pick up a tube is when I know that bass are spawning, but I can't see them. The thing about a tube, it's one of the more unique baits. If you put a light weight on a tube, say like for example, a 1/4 ounce weight, and you're fishing it in pretty shallow cover, you can actually pop a tube up, like say you flip it next to a piece of cover and you think that there might be a bed in this area, maybe there's a hole in the grass, a hole in the lily pads, whatever it may be. A tube is one of the more unique lures that if you put a light weight on it and you pop the bait up, you can get it to almost go up and fall straight back down in place. So if I think that a fish is in a very small area, like this big, I can work this bait a lot while keeping it in a very small place. And so therefore I feel like I get a lot of bites on a tube when it comes to fishing it that way. So anyways, those are a couple of the main reasons that I pick up a tube. It's a really good bait. This particular one right here is probably the one that I fish the most. It's a 4.5 inch, I believe now, it used to be the Denny Brower flipping tube. I think they maybe rebranded it to KVD. I don't know, I bought a ton of them a long time ago and I'm still working on that supply. But they have a hard head on them, a solid head, so you can get your bait in there. And the body is about, this is a 4.5 inch tube. I use a lot of different sizes, but I really like that one. I've caught a lot of bass on that one right there. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you pick up a tube, and I will see you guys in the next one.